The prairie stretched wide and empty, broken only by the sound of wind whistling across dry grass. A lonely rancher named Samuel lived on the edge of this vast land, his cabin standing like a stubborn sentinel against the wilderness. Days for him passed in silence, filled only with the lowing of cattle and the creak of his saddle. He was no stranger to hardship, yet there lingered a quiet longing in his heart, a desire for something beyond the endless routine of solitude. He did not know that fate was about to test him in unexpected ways. One evening, as the sun dipped, low and shadows stretched long, Samuel spotted movement near a creek that cut across his land. At first he thought it might be a wounded animal, but as he drew closer, he saw the figure of a young native girl. She was barely conscious, her skin pale with blood loss, a deep gash torn along her side. Fear gripped him. He knew the risks of helping, yet his heart overruled caution. Without hesitation, he lifted her into his arms and carried her back toward his cabin. Inside the small cabin, Samuel laid her on his bed and worked quickly. His hands, rough from years of ranching, moved with surprising gentleness as he cleaned the wound and wrapped it with strips of cloth. The girl stirred faintly, whispering in her own tongue, though he understood none of it. He offered water, holding it carefully to her lips. All through the night he tended her, burning away his last candles, determined to keep her alive. In the silence, he wondered who she was and what dangers her presence might bring. By dawn, the girl's fever broke, and her eyes flickered open. They were dark, sharp, filled with both fear and defiance. She pushed against him weakly, her spirit unbroken despite her injury. Samuel held up his hands, speaking softly, trying to assure her that she was safe. Though she did not understand his words, his tone carried kindness. Slowly, her breathing eased. She took a sip of water without resistance. He realized then that she was more than a stranger. She carried the pride and fire of her people, and her story was not yet spoken. Samuel spent the day caring for her while tending to his ranch chores. Each time he stepped outside, he felt the weight of unease pressing in. He knew well enough that no one traveled alone across the frontier without reason. If she belonged to a tribe, surely someone would come looking. That night, as she slept, Samuel sat by the dying fire, staring into the flames. He could not shake the thought that, by saving her, he might have invited danger upon himself. Still, he did not regret his choice. Compassion outweighed fear. The next morning, as sunlight poured over the hills, Samuel heard a distant sound. At first, it was only the faint rumble of hooves, but soon it grew into a thunderous echo. His chest tightened. Stepping outside, he froze at the sight before him. Warriors, dozens of them, rode across the prairie, their spears glinting, their faces stern with resolve. Within moments, they surrounded his ranch, circling like a storm closing in. Samuel's hands trembled as he glanced back at the cabin, realizing the girl was awake and watching silently. The warriors dismounted, their leader stepping forward with an expression of cold authority. He spoke in a commanding voice, Samuel did. Not understand, though the message was clear, the girl mattered to them. Samuel raised his hands, trying to show he meant no harm. The girl, though weak, forced herself to her feet and spoke rapidly in her own tongue. The chief's eyes flicked to her wound, then back to Samuel. The air was thick with tension, and Samuel feared one wrong move would bring bloodshed. After a long silence, the girl reached out and took Samuel's arm. The gesture stunned both him and the warriors. She spoke again, her tone softer, explaining what had happened. The chief's expression shifted, suspicion giving way to reluctant respect. He studied Samuel closely, as though measuring his soul. Finally, he signaled for his men to lower their weapons. Relief washed over Samuel like rain on parched land. though he remained wary, sensing that this fragile peace was not easily won. Over the next hours, the warriors remained near the ranch, watchful but no longer hostile. The girl rested, regaining her strength, while Samuel prepared food and offered it to their leader. Though they shared no common words, the act of hospitality bridged the gap between them. The chief accepted, his stern gaze softening slightly. Samuel realized then that survival on the frontier was not only about strength of arms, but about gestures of trust, however small. Each moment he spent among them felt like walking a narrow line between danger and understanding. As days passed, the girl's wound began to heal, her spirit returning stronger each sunrise. Samuel learned her name through fragments of words and gestures. Nayeli. She began to teach him simple phrases from her language, and he responded with patience. At night, she would hum quiet songs by the fire, songs that carried the weight of generations. Samuel listened in silence, his heart stirred by emotions he had long buried. What began as duty slowly transformed into something deeper, though neither dared speak of it. The tribe remained close, building fires on the edges of Samuel's land. He grew used to their presence, though he never fully let down his guard. Nayeli's father, the chief, often studied him with unreadable eyes, as if deciding whether Samuel was a friend or simply a man who owed a debt. The ranch, once silent, now pulsed with unfamiliar life. Samuel's loneliness began to ease, replaced by a strange sense of belonging. Yet he knew that peace on the frontier was fragile and could be broken in an instant. One evening, outlaws descended upon the ranch, drawn by greed and cruelty. Gunfire cracked across the open land, echoing through the night. Samuel fought desperately, his rifle steady but his heart pounding with fear. Just as he feared he would be overwhelmed, the Apache warriors charged from the darkness, their battle, cries splitting the air. Together they drove the outlaws away, their combined strength forcing the raiders to scatter. In that moment, Samuel realized that the bond forged in trust had become something unbreakable. He was no longer alone. After the fight, the chief approached Samuel with solemn pride. Through Nayeli's translation, he offered words of respect, acknowledging the courage Samuel had shown. More than that, he recognized the compassion that had led him to save Nayeli in the first place. Samuel stood in humble silence, unsure how to respond. He had not sought honor or reward, only to do what felt right. Yet in the eyes of the tribe, his actions carried weight. He had proven himself not only as a man, but as an ally. As time moved forward, Samuel and Nayeli shared quiet moments that spoke louder than words. She taught him her people's ways while he showed her the work of ranch life. Side by side, they bridged the distance between two worlds, learning from one another. Samuel's cabin, once a place of silence and sorrow, now echoed with laughter, song, and the sound of shared living. He found in her not only gratitude, but companionship, and perhaps something even greater. The loneliness that had once haunted him was gone. On a cool evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars emerged one by one, Samuel sat by the fire with Nayeli beside him. The tribe camped peacefully nearby, their presence no longer a threat, but a comfort. He realized then that the decision he had made, to save one wounded girl without thought of consequence, had changed the course of his life. In healing her, he had also healed himself. And in the stillness of that night, the lonely rancher finally felt whole.